Okay. Hi, I'm James McGuire, editor of Datamation, and our topic today is the Internet of Things, the future of IoT. To talk about that, I'm joined by Jason Shepard, Director of IoT Strategy and Partnerships at Dell. How are you doing, Jason?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Good. And you are there, looks like in sunny Austin, correct?
Sunny Austin. Well, it's a little rainy outside, but it's like 80 degrees, whereas like 2 weeks ago it was 20. So
Right. Yeah.
welcome to Texas.
There you go. So you wrote a pretty neat document. It's called Five Predictions for the Internet of Things in 2017. I thought we'd go through that. It's basically 5 bullet points, and I think it pretty much sums up where IoT is headed in 2017. Point number one, you say measuring business impact and ROI and security fears will be the greatest inhibitors of IoT projects and solutions. In other words, businesses aren't sure if it's going to make them any money, and they're also concerned about hacking. So what's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that we're seeing, I mean, this is a go-to-market and a business question before it's even about technology. I mean, obviously the technology is key, and that's kind of our play here. But lots and lots of solutions looking for problems out there that don't really resonate with what a business is really really going to be interested in. That's really going to drive impact. Yes, I would love to save energy, which is obviously a great use case, but does that really motivate me over the 10 other things that I have to do, that I have to spend money on and time? So unless you really resonate, well, it's because of this and this and this and this, or who you're talking with, whether it's the operations group or the IT group, just kind of what really resonates with them. There's also the potential, as you make things more efficient, to expose dirty laundry. People don't like to highlight that they're not efficient, in some cases. So you also have to take into those things, take into account those things. So lots of talk about the potential. Of course, Dell wouldn't be in if we didn't think that there was incredible potential. We think we're kind of hitting the start of the real ramp, but you really have to consider those things around what motivates people, what's the real ROI. Is it driven by some sort of compelling event versus wouldn't that be nice to have? Because human nature is you tend to put off nice to haves.
Right.
So things like, hey, there is governmental regulation to go solve this type of thing, like whether it's emissions in an oil and gas rig, like where it's, say, carbon monoxide, or some sort of continuity of supply for power in another area, or et cetera, like where there's regulation, that drives paying in terms of fines if you don't meet that requirement. So we're seeing good uptake in that type of stuff. So it's not like, wouldn't it be nice? Like, I want to avoid public exposure and fines. So
you make the point too. I thought it's interesting that some of the companies in these early days, don't want to share their results if they've successfully deployed.
Absolutely.
So it's a competitive factor. So if there are more use cases out there publicly, it might move IoT faster in terms of the ROI factor.
Right. So you look at smart cities. I mean, I like smart departments. I like to talk about smart departments, not smart cities, which is kind of nebulous. But let me talk about the privately contracted trash department, for a city, and making them more efficient because it hits the bottom line versus overall city. But on that point is cities tend to be more altruistic in terms of wanting to advertise what they've done for their population, whereas businesses tend to want to keep it to themselves and not, especially not highlight hard metrics on the gain.
The private sector, right?
Right. So getting those details from the private sector and being able to say, hey, this helped for a customer. It's very similar to you. So in your context, this is what you can expect. Having that data is one thing, but then also making sure that people are confident enough that they'll get a similar return, so they'll take that leap of faith. So we're really focused on, not only what's that true ROI and considering what motivates people, but also, how do you then take that and bundle it up into, what we're calling lookalikes, where like, hey, this really worked for you, and now it can work for somebody else. But it's a lot of times what you think is the real business value to someone, it's not actually what it ends up being.
What do you mean by that?
One example, being, is you look at, okay, we've been using this example a lot lately, but so we've seen some good traction, is if I just say that I can save you power on your refrigeration within a grocery store, well, great, but the real value by an order of magnitude is the stuff inside of those freezers. And so unless you do kind of a project around the supply chain and understanding customer satisfaction with stuff, that A, that, you know, the stuff tasted good, and B, they didn't get sick because it went out of temperature,
Right.
you know, or you didn't wipe out an entire amount, you know, wall of stock because those, you know, 20-year-old controllers failed on those refrigeration units, which could take out your profits for the week, you know, if not longer.
Right.
That's the real motivator, and not, you know, just those simple energy savings. Altogether, it's great, but you've got to kind of harp on what really hits the hot buttons with customers. So we're looking at that kind of stuff, you know, throughout different markets. So of course it's about, you know, focus on use cases and whatnot, but then double clicking, what's the extra, you know, stuff behind it that drives action.
Essentially, you also mentioned, you know, security being one of the big inhibitors, and obviously we saw some huge hack attacks in 2016. And I thought it's interesting. You wrote, as the business value and associated attack service grows for IoT, so will the interest of attackers. Throughout 2017, hackers will continue to exploit IoT device vulnerabilities to launch broad-scale attacks. So you're certainly not whitewashing the security fears of IoT.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, security, you know, I'll qualify some of this is that the DDoS attacks that were widely publicized, you know, in the fall or whatnot, late last year.
Right.
The majority of actors or devices on the network that, you know, participated in those attacks, they were had almost no security applied. I mean, literally, I think it was like a combination of something like 8 unique credentials could hack into millions and millions of devices.
Right.
So you got to separate the PR problems versus, you know, with people that just kind of deployed stuff. You know, in consumer, what we're seeing is that either no security is applied because someone doesn't really treat it seriously, or they didn't really know what they were doing. And the other reason why is people make it too easy to bypass security measures so you can get instant gratification in setting it up.
Right.
You know, you're trading off usability for security. So got to separate that out. But you know, of course, it's still very important. It's about using best practices, layered models of tools based on the need. And we're going to see increasing focus from businesses as they invest. But you know, I see security as something behind the business value. If you can't solve the business value and see something that meets needs for your business, you don't have a security problem. So you're not going to do it.
Right.
But they do go hand in hand, because you want to treat you know security as paramount from the very beginning. And then exactly, you know, as we start to scratch the surface on really hardcore business value, then the hackers are going to get super interested. So we've got to kind of keep
they will up their game as well. Yeah. Point number 2 that is interesting. You talk about consolidation of IoT platforms through open source collaboration. So open source is going to be a big factor. And part of that, I thought this was really interesting that there are over 400 IoT platforms, which is confusing to end customers and slows down the process of solution development. But really, 400 IoT platforms out there?
Yeah,
does that mean anyone can create one in their garage?
Yeah, I think there's 401 now in the past few minutes. But you know, I mean, it's varying degrees of like end-to-end platforms, from data ingestion all the way through analytics. There's different analytics platforms. I mean, it's kind of a little bit all munged together. But you know, the fact of the matter is there's hundreds of platforms, way too many than you need to solve these problems. Typical of any new market. Obviously, people pile in. I mean, there's a couple of trends that I could talk about that we've seen. I mean, I've been looking at the space for about 3 years. I've been on, the strategy at Dell since the very beginning, with a core team that then evolved into our business. And we've seen it mature and everything ramp up, and then this will be the year of the exit strategy for a number of platforms that kind of see the writing on the wall. And then
right,
the other thing is the bigger players, historically, up till kind of middle of last year, it was kind of this, hey, we're going to own everything. We're going to lock people in. We're going to own the end-to-end stack and just tie people in.
Right.
And then about mid last year, give or take, is when people realized, man, this is hard. And we don't need to own everything. We need to start to consolidate, because interoperability and openness is what drives scale. That's what our business has always been found on. We're all about openness and choice. That's what you need for this market. Nobody wins if you write stuff in the vacuum just to get stuff connected. And so I can talk a couple points on that one, but I mean, basically 2016 was the year, like if digital transformation was a 12-step program, last year was step 1, admitting you're having a problem. and so,
but the interesting part too is that you say, as a result, we will see a leading open source platform project emerge that provides a center of gravity for data integration. I guess who do you think will lead that open source platform? The
Well, I think
product.
we're very much involved in some things that you're going to hear about some stuff soon. Um, there's a lot of people that are like, hey, you know what? I don't need to own everything. Very, very interested in driving some of that consolidation. I think that we're at the peak of the platform proliferation. Maybe not quite at the peak, but it's going to start to rapidly drop because
I see we have 403 platforms now in the last couple of
yes, there
minutes.
you
So
go. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it might begin to dip down early next week.
Yes, yes.
What,
So it's we've been monitoring very closely. We've been very active in incubating these concepts and working with the standards bodies and consortia and whatnot to align on, hey, let's converge where it doesn't matter, to be different, and then let's be as differentiated as we need to be around that. That's where you're making your value add. So the point I'd make on that. So look at consumer. I mean, consumer. We decided, 3 years ago, we're not going to get into consumer. Verbatim said, hey, the winners in consumer will be those who own the content into the household and the flow of consumer goods, i.e. Amazon.
mm-hmm.
And the reason that works is because, Amazon's, obviously Amazon was like the biggest presence at CES and they weren't even there because of Alexa.
Right. Right.
And so that was kind of like the new killer app last year around creating a center of gravity. And the reason why is because Amazon makes money elsewhere and not on that plumbing. They sell it for a very low cost. They make their money on the content, the data, selling consumer goods, providing that experience created a center of gravity for people to latch on, and they can do that because of they make their money elsewhere. In business, because of legacy, because of the need to share data across businesses and have that trust factor. You don't have that content equation or the consumer goods that's that sort of power play there. It only works in open source. No single company can own it.
Right.
And so that's what we're active in doing is helping to work with other industry leaders and a bunch of our startup partners as well to go drive that effort. So we're going to see, because of admitting we have a problem last year, we're going to see a major consolidation efforts happen this year, and it will happen in the community.
So point number 3 in your 5 main points of where IoT is going this year. Point number 3 is increased focus on use case within verticals. And I think it's interesting. In 2017, the market will have deep conversation on use case development within our industrial verticals. It's not just refrigerators and coffee makers anymore. It's healthcare, finance, education. What's the case for verticals?
I mean, so verticals, we see it, Dell is focused on building, infrastructure for industrial IoT solutions between energy segments. These are broad verticals, and then I'll talk some use cases. So broad verticals is energy, manufacturing, and transportation. So those broad verticals, of course, there's things like healthcare and government, military, and BFSI and the like. But we're looking at those, obviously because there's ROI there, but also because there's a large component of in manufacturing. There's a lot of convergence that can happen between the operations groups and the IT groups, and being able to connect formerly isolated silos and bridge them over to data systems like ERP and the like, to drive business value through analytics. So there's a big convergence happening there. If you've been to any conference, you've seen the Venn diagram of operations, OT, and IT converging, and it's happening. And depending on who you ask on either side, they'll say, well, it's my job, but then there's this still kind of like tension between, and we want to go drive that. So a big part for us is our strategy is offering the broadest IoT infrastructure portfolio is to bring that IT credibility to help that OT IT convergence, the operations converging with IT. So vertically speaking, we've been focusing on energy, manufacturing, and transportation. Based on a bunch of different data that we've seen. We hear it very consistently in other reports that come through after the analysis that we've done. We see it, among our customers and whatnot. The reason, for some of the other markets is what I would call stakeholder complexity. So like, healthcare, obviously very interesting, but there's a lot of liability issues. There's a lot of stuff when you cross between public and private. So broadly speaking, those are the verticals that we're focused on, but we're also opportunistically going over after other ones. More important is to talk about use cases, because a good use case spans all verticals.
Right.
Like predictive maintenance is not just for manufacturing. That would go into building equipment. It would certainly go into hospitals or any number of things, smart agriculture or whatnot. So we're going to flip. We've flipped kind of a lot more to very much focusing on use cases, whether it's predictive maintenance or automated process control, and bridging the operations group to the IT group, transportation and logistics, and even some of the double clicks below that. The traction that we're seeing together with our partners is all when it's hyper focused on a use case. People that are like, hey, I can do everything for everybody. Check out these babies. What do you want? You end up doing nothing because it's paralyzing. Like, where do you start?
Right.
But the people are like, that are the expert, that know more than you ever wanted to know about a given topic, they're the ones that are doing stuff, because when you solve pain, well, people call you.
Right.
And so this market goes vertical before it goes horizontal. It just so happens that a lot of it tends to be tied to a siloed platform. So here's a proprietary platform, we're going after this market. Here's a proprietary platform, we're going after this market. That's kind of the way it is right now. But what you'll see, especially as prediction 2 takes hold, which is convergence, it'll be applied domain expertise across more of this common interoperable foundation that enables distributed computing. And then I put all my proprietary value add around that and my domain expertise, and then I go solve problems. It's just kind of coming about it a slightly different way, because right now it's like, take some of these silos and get focus. Longer term, you would like to have more of a horizontal base and then apply vertical to go after the use cases. So.
The point number 4 you made of the top 5, vendors will focus on certifications to help advance IoT growth. And you point in particularly, for example, IBM's Watson IoT Academy and the PTC University's ThingWorks. So first of all, it's for those IT job seekers out there, that's obviously it's a career opening. It's a growing market. Are you thinking that qualified personnel are holding back the growth of IoT?
Well, no, I think platform proliferation is holding it back, and once you solve that problem, and then I mean, obviously we mentioned talked about the business use case and some of the security fears, but these solutions are complex. So step 1, address the business case. Step 2 is don't reinvent the wheel, for just core interoperability. And once you kind of start to drive some traction there, then certifications have become extremely important because these solutions are so complex.
Right.
But if I got certified in one of 400 platforms, well, it doesn't mean a whole lot.
Right.
Great.
Right.
I mean, obviously there's centers of gravity around things like Watson, which is clearly important, and we're working closely with IBM on that. Like then things really become more meaningful when you get certified, when you've got this core foundation for interoperability. And that exposes things that are consistent around how you do the basics of security, how you do the basics of systems management, the APIs that enable the foundation, and then people build their own proprietary systems management tools, security tools. These are the basics of how you do connectivity more consistently. The reason why, of course, you see in the PC space, you see a lot of centers of gravity around Windows and iOS or
right.
Mac.
Right.
Well, or obviously mobile, it's Android and iOS. The reason why you don't see that at the OS level in IoT, it's very difficult because there's so much fragmentation in operating systems, in embedded solutions. Lots of flavors of Linux, lots of flavors of Windows. I mean, there's people out there that are still using XP, if not earlier, that they'll use it until they die.
Those are some brave people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the more you can abstract out of the OS and put into a very flexible platform that sits on top of the OS, but make that really open, the better. So we're really focused on working with people there. And then if you take, as the communities start to evolve around that, and current platform companies start to adopt those types of interoperable principles as a broader industry, now certifications really mean something. So we think that as these trends start to happen, the convergence starts to happen, then the certs come up. That also gives customers, so in addition just to stabilization, the certs start to give customers confidence that they can trust in these solutions. So
right.
It's all kind of a sequence.
Point five is really my favorite of your top five. Artificial intelligence will increasingly be used to mine the data coming from IoT devices. Forrester tells us there will be greater than 300% increase in investment in artificial intelligence in 2017 over last year. So definitely AI is going to be huge in 2017. It makes sense that AI would power Internet of Things because there's such a deluge of data. It's far too much for humans to really digest. So
Right.
what is it about AI and IoT?
Well, it's taking the complexity out of the interaction, making it more natural to interact with the physical world. Tied into this is a bit of AR and VR. AR, we're more bullish on for IoT because it's literally, overlaying the physical, the data that's collected and analyzed back on top of the physical world where it was collected from.
Right.
But I mean, being able to more naturally interact with a smarter world makes it just much more palatable to use. When you have mobile device, obviously mobile's not going away, mobile devices, smartphones, and the like. But let's take the home example again. If I'm in my house and I have 10 different apps to manage 10 different siloed things inside of my house, and I've got to like click, 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 page, click, turn
Right.
up the remote volume on the TV versus, hey, TV, turn up the remote, turn up the volume. Or I could just as well go pick up my remote control that I've had for 20 years and turn up the volume.
Right.
It's in that moment interaction that takes away multiple steps and makes it more of a natural deal. That's where AI is really going to come in from that interface. Of course, you're seeing AI and things like autonomous cars and the like, but having that kind of killer interface will help further adoption. Or if I'm in a factory and I'm a machine worker, I can use a combination of AI and AR, augmented reality, to interface with machines while I'm doing maintenance. And
Right.
or I could have like an expert in the back end training me so real time I'm seeing data coming from temperature and pressure and this, that, and the other on this equipment that I have to monitor while I'm doing this sequence. And then I'm also being able to interact naturally through speech. That's some of that stuff that's going to take hold.
That's a big
But
part, I think, by the way, the natural language speech enabled by AI. I think it's going to be a big driver of it.
right. But none of this takes mainstream scale until you figure out interoperability. Hence why I went a little practical this year on the predictions. Yes, blockchain is interesting. That's a little bit out, but we're looking at blockchain. Yes, AR, VR, we're very active looking at those topics, very active looking at AI, and are working with a number of partners that are building out AI solutions. It's all super important, but you also have to figure out the basics. And so, cutting through the hype on some of that was important for this year.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think you said it. That's five great directions. Do you care to cast into your crystal ball for maybe the next 12 months, several years? What will we be talking about when we're in the year 2020 and we're talking about Internet of Things? What will we be talking about if you look that far ahead? Bravely.
I think, well, for starters, I don't think we're going to be talking about Internet of Things. It's just going to be business.
Right.
I mean, do we still talk about e-commerce? No, you just buy stuff online.
It's called the network. Right.
Right. It's just what you do. So we think that, IoT's super buzzy right now, high value, but you just got to make sure that you find it, and exploit where the real value is, and not just, hey, wouldn't that be neat? But over time, I mean, it's business. I mean, it's more pervasive throughout our lives. Definitely the killer apps will be out there. Definitely expanding way down into small and medium business. If you're looking at the commercial side of things, especially as things become more interoperable, you can package things up and deliver them to more and more people. A lot of stuff happening in developing countries. I mean, it's very interesting to look at the needs between maybe in the US, we see people like, I want to eke the last little percentage bit out of the power grid. And we talk with customers, maybe an APJ, and they're like, I just want to have power, in some sort of developing country. So it's like, you're going to see a lot more stuff happening worldwide that drives a lot of change. But I just don't think it's going to be, like the buzzword IoT necessarily. Right. And it happens to get a lot of hits on the internet right now. So, you want to latch onto it, but
sure.
It's just more pervasive, more natural interaction, high value, a lot less noise, in terms of stuff out there. And just, I think it's just going to be starting to hit real scale.
Jason, I think you said it. That's great. Looking forward to an interesting year ahead in the Internet of
Yeah.
Things sector. Thanks for joining us. I'll send you the link. We can tweet it. I thank you very much for your time today. Great stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
You too.